Hello, one and all, and welcome to the final round of the Porsche Supercup here at SSRI. This time coming from Germany at the Nurburgring. Nearly said Nordschleife, which if it was the Nordschleife layout, I think we might be here. Well, maybe not for longer, but I don't think we'd have many laps and many opportunities, to say the least. We might have a couple of deaths, but I don't think the drivers would particularly like to enjoy that layout, to say the least. But nevertheless, we are here sitting around with a very, very healthy lead within the league standings from one Ben Crook within this league. Now, as you probably have picked up, I am actually the only person here today. Sadly, Patrick is away, but nevertheless, my recovering COVID voice should hopefully be able to drag us through this race. But back to the point on hand, which was Ben Crook, who is currently on 265 points with 6 wins out of 12 races. He currently has a 50% win rate in this entire league, with I believe 2 of those races being taken away by someone who isn't even driving in the league anymore, which doesn't help, to say the least. And I believe that was Andrew Richardson, who appeared for Silverstone early on in the league. And the other 4, which he hasn't won, was when he wasn't here. So at the moment, Crook seemed like the biggest threat. Now, overall in the standings, each driver does get a dropout race where the points are deducted and basically that race doesn't count. However, naturally in Crook's favor, he missed a race. He can drop that one. Enough said. He basically just doesn't lose any points. However, his main rival threat at the moment is Dave Jr. with 239 points. Now, can't remember the points or how many points it is for a win. See if I can try and find that out a bit later on. But nevertheless, I would say the best scenario for Dave Jr. to actually sneak this win away from Crook is pit maneuver him on corner 1 and run away and get the win. As Jr., I think, actually joined mid-season. Wasn't around. I remember seeing him in Spa, actually, to say the least, which was round 3, I believe. But he had a couple of issues. He didn't seem to be too confident with the car. But nevertheless, towards the end of the season, picking up 2 wins, which I believe were both in the last race. I've missed a couple of races, so that doesn't help, to say the least. But having quite a much stronger performance overall, and coming out of nowhere, to say the least. Then as we look a bit further back, 218 points, we have Vincent Vilcek, who has 1 win, but has pretty much been our George Russell of this season. Mr. Consistent, to say the least. He's always been peaking his eyes at the front runners, never really being able to keep up, as Crook's normally been the one running away, but we did have some very, very good fights between Crook and Vilcek himself. So very much a contender, to say the least. The top 3 probably going to be the ones giving the performance up front. But then we look back a bit further into the sub-200s. We've got Dan Lenson on 193 in 4th. Also 1 win on his half. And then we looking a bit further back to make the top 5 with Andreas Westkamp. So top 5 actually having quite a bit of a disparity, but one fight I have been keeping an eye on pretty much all season long, as it started to really get quite close, is actually 6th and 7th, before I drop any or stop calling out names, because these are the last 2 people with over 100 points, with Yannick Valenduc and Simon Wilkes, who are on 165 and 161 points. So only 4 points between them, which I'm hoping both of them are here today, because then they would give us some very, very, very interesting racing to see positions within the overall series. I'm just having a quick peek. Sadly, I don't see Valenduc, and actually I do now remember, I think I saw him signing out, so that one is a bit unfortunate. as there's nothing really we can do on that side of things. But nevertheless, looking forward now, if we have a quick look at our venue for today, which is, like mentioned, the Nurburgring, and we have, as always, some beautiful fancy graphics here. So looking into Sector 1, as you come down the main straight, there's going to be a very, very heavy braking zone at the end as you head into the Castrol S, which is always going to be a bit throwing off because there's that little kink just before you make it. You go through the Mercedes Arena, which then heads down here into Sector 2, where you head through RTL and the Ford Curve, down into the hairpin at the bottom, which will then send you up through the Schumacher S's, up to the much longer straight towards the Como Curve, which is that nice little kink, which is a sign of bravery, to say the least, within especially these sort of cars. And then you head down another bit of a straight with a little bit of a kink in Sector 3, which should be flat out no matter what you're in. And then you head down to the Vidal chicane, which is something that you don't normally have on this circuit. Well, you don't have to have on this circuit, to say the least. But that is another bravery area where you can very much send it through very high speed if you've got the confidence within the car. So that's going to be a good sign between each driver. Then you head to the final chicane, which will bring you back to the start-finish straight. So that being our venue for today, looking back at the drivers, as I believe qualifying has just elapsed. Not too sure. I'm keeping an eye on pit wall at the moment. So keeping an eye on the I'm trying to just get an idea of what drivers we have and what positions they are in the standings. So we have got the man, the myth, the legend within this entire series, Ben Crook, sitting there at second. Everyone out on an outlap at the moment. So naturally, these positionings are more than likely going to change. Second place is around as well at the bottom there, Dave Jr. in the number 10 car. And then I see Andreas Vestkamp who's fifth, Vilcek as well, the third place. So we've got the top three, to say the least. Sadly, Dan Lenson isn't around, as I believe earlier in the season, I think it was around the fourth, maybe fifth round, he signed out, which is unfortunate. Looking around, we've got Patrick Tractor, someone I think who's always enjoyed these cars. He's been around pretty much every single race, definitely all the ones I've commentated. Never been a front runner, but he's always seemed to be enjoying himself. And then personally, I see some new names, at least to me. I might not have seen them before, in the form of Fredriksson, Marius Fredriksson, who has only done 2 races. So yes, very new, only joining in the penultimate race and now this one. So maybe another contender. Not too sure what sort of pace he's going to be bringing into this, but I'm hoping it's going to be enough to at least bring some entertainment, whether it's with Dave Jr., whether it's Vilcek, whether it's even with Patrick Tractor. We obviously just want some entertainment. And then another name, which I don't recognize, in the form of Partez. Adrius Iridu. Oh, I'm gonna be terrified saying that. I'm just gonna call you Partez, please don't hate me. Who also joined last race, so the penultimate and this one. So both of them coming through. Seems like they are on similar pace, as they scored the points enough to just keep them apart. So hopefully these two are going to bring some decent fighting between the two, along with Patrick Tractor. But then obviously all eyes are going to be on the top 3 of Crook Jr., Vilcek, and Vestkamp, who is currently in 5th. So sadly for Vestkamp, I don't think there's really too much he can do in terms of scarring any of the top 3. He can't really make a leap for them, but top 3, maybe the gap's just as big, to be honest. So overall, these standings seem a bit solid, unless some very, very big drama happens tonight, with one of them spinning out, crashing, you name it, just straight up DCing. Who knows? This is an online race, so anything could happen at this point. But hopefully, with qualifying now getting underway, is once again Ben Crook showing why he is so dominant in this series. 1.2 seconds ahead of second place, which is Dave Jr., which Jr. and Vilcek at the moment are only separated by 5 thousandths of a second. So incredibly close between those two. And then as we look back a bit more, got Tractor, Veskamp, and Fredriksson, and I think Barthez is just coming up to get his first time on the board. Let's see how good his pace is here. As he comes line, goes up to 4th. Very promising to say the least. Getting up there with the top 3. Veskamp comes along. Gets a decent improvement on his time. Fredriksson more than likely going to be improving himself. As we come across the line, he's going to still be in 7th, but yes, that was an improvement. Goes to 4.6 gap. As we look along, I think it's a 2-on-2. Vilcek coming down. Whereabouts are we? This is coming into the Kumo curve. Now heading down main straight. There's a yellow flag. That's a car in the wall. That's the 95. I believe, oh, 45, sorry. That was Veskamp. Someone I did not expect to say in the wall so soon. I have seen him have some moments, but nothing that big so soon on. And that might also be the update to the physics in the game, which actually is something I didn't think about. Obviously, the big 1.9 update that's happened in the Sector Corsa is more than likely going to have affected these cars a decent bit with the tire changes and suspension. So these cars, notoriously being quite low, are going to be especially bouncy, to say the least. And there's a bit of an example on it, as once you hit that curb, the car can go bouncing for an eternity if you're not careful. Veskamp, I've just heard, is apparently 0.6 up. So I believe he was the one in the wall, but whether he's managing to gain time on a spin, who knows? I do think he was. Whether he's RTG, might have been insane, but will he improve on the time, to say the least? He does, so it definitely wasn't Veskamp in the wall. I think I'm losing my mind on that one. As he jumps up into 4th, takes parties down, who was looking very, very hopeful, to say the least. Actually, as I've been talking about everyone else, I did actually just realize Crook has improved on his own time, as now that gap is just becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. Dave Jr. and Vilcek really need to get a jump in these initial races to at least put pressure onto Crook so that he just doesn't run away, because in the earlier races, as soon as Crook gets away, he just starts hot lapping, and that's it. He's gone, and it's almost impossible to catch up. But obviously, as I've mentioned before, these physics, or not physics updates, the tire updates, potentially going to be changing how these feels. But from the looks of things, it just has not affected Crook. As we see Vincent Vilcek going through the Schumacher chicane, or Schumacher S's, sorry, getting a bit of sideways through there, but that's pretty much how you need to drive these cars to at least get some pace out of them. Going through the Kumo curve, heading down the long straight, which is going to have that little kink in the middle, should be flat out, hopefully. Probably is going to need to have the tires up to temperature if you're going to do that. Seems under control. Currently up. He's going to send it through. Vidal now into the final chicane, coming round. Good pace on this. It seems like those tires really are up to temperature. Doesn't cut in as much as he can possibly. But is he going to improve on this? Does he jump Junior? He does. Junior has the pressure on him now. And there's a 40. The 45 has now got a yellow flag, as I'm just quickly looking at the track map. As we come, I'm trying to look whereabouts we are. So number 10 coming through. So now we're on the Schumacher S. I realise where we are. Coming down up to the curve. Heavy braking. As I hear from our beautiful producer, Mr. Chris Hill, that he's similarly up on his time at the moment, 0.2, so he's very much in threat against Vilcek at the moment. Big send through there, tyres very much holding on now, as all eyes are on Junior now, as everyone else is in the pits. Big send over the curve, seems poised at the moment. Coming through the final corner, get on the gas as soon as possible. And he's going to have a very big increase from what I just heard. He was even within a second of Ben Crook. So very, very big pace at the end there from Dave Jr. But overall, that will solidify the qualifying for the 2 races, which, just to quickly run over the format again, so we have 2 races, or 2 quick sprints, a 20-minute and a 30-minute sprint. The qualifying for both of these are done as we just did, and the results do not roll over, but each are scored individually. And at the moment, so if I look through the standings of the qualifying we had, so naturally on top we have Ben Crook, who was followed by Dave Jr., who had some very, very impressive pace at the end. Vincent Vilcek, who is in second overall at the moment, is in third, so he's probably going to want to try and argy-bargy his way as quickly as possible up those front runners, which is very, very doable on this track if you're brave enough, obviously, as we see the exact corner I am referring with that first hairpin. Looking further down, we have Andreas Westkamp sitting in 4th, who will be alongside Vilcek. Patrick Tractor in 5th, with Partes and Fredriksson bring up the rear, who's sadly going to be on his lonesome on that rear pack. But it does seem like we have some very interesting grouping here going on. It seemed like I was relatively right with the sense that Fredriksson, Partes, and Tractor are potentially going to be the ones fighting at the back. But don't get me wrong, that's nothing bad, because we've had some very, very interesting fights at the rear of the this series, and boy has it been entertaining. We've had drifting, to say at least, all of it. That one I remember very explicitly from Spa. But then going up, Westkamp potentially going to be fighting Vilcek. That one's more than possible. Vilcek, though, more than likely is going to be one with better pace than them, and is going to be looking further forwards to the likes of Dave Jr. and Crook. Which Crook, we're hoping he's going to be held up, to say the least, to at least get a decent race out of him. We obviously want Dave Jr. to more than likely get the jump of him going into the first corner, so that Crook just doesn't start the hop lapping, which I mentioned earlier, and just get away. But as we await the final starting of the race, just going to have a quick look back at the standings. Actually, see if I can find out how these points work. So it's 35 points for a win, 30 for second, 25, 20, 18, 16, 14. Right. So with that information in hand, let's have a quick look at the standings. So 35 for a win. This is actually more interesting than previously anticipated. So 35, actually, one thing I didn't check was if that was for both races. Race 1, race 2, I think it is... Yes, so it is per race, so that does make things very interesting. So there's 60 points up for grabs overall, which very much means everyone's in contention for each other. That's given everyone finishes the race. Crook could very much have his title taken away from Junior, who has been around all season. I just realized, I don't know why I said he hasn't, but he has been around all season. It just seemed like the latter, or this first half of the season, just didn't seem to be as strong as the second, as he's started to run up run up the ranks very, very quickly. And that means my initial interpretation of those top three potentially being too far apart is far from true. Because if Junior just has a massive technical problem in one of the races, and Vilcek wins, that's him through straight away. Ben Crook could have one of those scenarios, lose one race, but then hopefully if he gets ahead of either Junior or Vilcek in the second, that will mean he just takes the title overall, which at the moment very much the favorite with the sort of pace we've even been seeing in qualifying. But naturally, race pace and qualifying pace are two very, very different things, which is why I keep bringing up the fact that hopefully Junior and Vilcek can keep Crook out of that hot lapping mentality, because once he's in there, he is a speed demon. Now, as we get onto the formation lap, going around the Nurburgring, I'm just going to quickly have a drink because my throat is going. So you might have to get used to this, anyone listening in, because as I mentioned, I'm kind of still recovering from COVID, but hopefully it shouldn't affect me too much during this race. But I'll give everyone a bit of a quiet outlap so you can listen to the beautiful engines of these Porsches. As we come around the final corner, the outlap actually being, or the formation lap, sorry, being quite crucial now, as tyre temps being quite prominent as we get the green light. Everyone coming down, Ben Crook getting a good getaway, but that is that's Vilcek looking very close on Dave Jr.'s rear wing, trying to get close on the outside, but Junior is going around the outside. Crook gets a little bit sideways, but he's going to hold the position for now. Junior looking up the inside, but that's going to compromise him a little bit as Vilcek's swerving around behind him to have a look at what's going on, as I think we've had a spinner already. I think that's the green car of Marius Fredriksson sitting in the background now. That's a very unfortunate start for him. As Crook already taking pace and gapping the people behind. Wait for the first timing line to get a good idea of that. And I've seen a car in the background go sideways straight into the barrier. I'm not sure who that was. That was the 45. That was Vestkamp. Already gone off. The sad nature of what was happening in qualifier has come to haunt him now in the race itself. I don't think he's gotten a good grip on what's happening with the new tyres in this game at the moment, as going sideways seems to be quite a common thing. Myself experiencing that especially. There's now already a 0.7 gap between Junior and Crook. But then that 0.5 of Vilcek, I think Junior is looking more in his mirrors at Vilcek at the moment than anything. Patrick Tractor, you see a bit further back, but he seems like he's managing to pull away from Barthez as well. Vestkamp and then Fredriksson obviously having their unfortunate nature at the back as well. As we keep an eye on these people at the front at the moment. Vilcek looking very pacey on Junior at the moment. Crook, I'm sad. It's looking scary already. He's gotten a 1.2 second gap, and it's only the first lap. As we look back, this is Vestkamp. What happened here? I believe it's just the fact that the tires were not warm, pushing the car a little too hard. Maybe touching grass a little bit on the outside on that one. Not too sure. It seems like he kept his foot in way too hard. And obviously these new tyre models do have a tendency to understeer quite a bit more if the car's not happy. Going forwards, Junior actually the one setting the fastest lap on this. Bit unusual to say the least, as he's the one in second place, but Vilcek looking like he's getting a bit aggressive on the throttle. Yeah, going sideways twice. It seems like now you need to be a little more careful with how you control these things, as the more you do, the more it will bite. And there's Crook once again pulling away. Seems like that guy might have come down a little bit. Junior catching up a decent bit. But obviously Vilcek, I think, is still a little bit closer in his rear mirror. So he doesn't want to get too comfortable with just staying away, as 1 second both ways is now the gap. And these cars already seeming to split apart very heavily. As I see Barthez trying to hold on to the back of Patrick Tractor's car, more towards the back of the pack. As some dust is coming up. I think that was coming off of Tractor's car as he goes a little wide. Barthez holding on to the back of Tractor's car, getting sideways very squirrely through there. Keeps it under control though, well held. Because these cars, if you do upset them too much, they are going to bite back very hard. I'm a little annoyed that the HUD doesn't show us the tire pressures, because I would be very interested to see pressures and especially temperatures now, as they do mean quite a bit more in the grand scheme of things. Obviously, there's a sense of team privacy, to say the least, on these sort of things. As we go over the start-finish line, let's see how far behind now. 0.62. Barthez is holding very nicely onto the back of Patrick Tractor, who's had a bit more experience than Barthez in this car. So he's doing a very good job. Gets a much narrower line through there, but he gets too early onto the throttle. Maybe the drop in that first corner catching him off a little bit, so the car does step out, losing that unfortunate advantage of the better line through the first corner. Go through the slow chicane. This one is always a pain for me. I haven't driven around Nurburgring too much, but I do remember that chicane always catches me out with how tight it is. As we head further down through the RTL, the Ford Curve. Gap does seem to be stretching out a bit more. Tractor, I think, having the confidence within that car is paying dividends at the moment. But nevertheless, holding onto the back. A bit further back, Vestkamp doesn't seem to be catching up too much. Obviously, more than likely going to be the racier one out of the lot towards the back, so more than likely going to be able to do anything, as I think we've just had a bit of an internet moment, as Porsches apparently now can completely go into the void and just teleport through the track. Not too sure what's happening at the moment. I'm hoping our producer Chris Hill is still here. Is the server died? As we see a Porsche killing the crowd. We have a bit of, I think we have technical issues, as we see Porsches kind of scattered everywhere. We've thrown them into the crowd. They've gone on vacation. Apparently the racing line has changed from what I originally knew on this track. There's some lines that involve you going through the crowd and just straight up going on a safari trip. So not too sure what happened there. I'm hoping there's people sitting around in the background. Maybe the guys in the actual race are going to have a look at that themselves. But whether that was the server, whether that was just straight up the game being the game, because there was actually a patch that I was released earlier today, which I hope it's nothing to do with that. But that was mainly to do with fixing the Ferrari, the 295, which had a driver swap issue. But no, everything seems all right. Not too sure what happened there. Our producer taking fault for that one, but I'm not too sure because obviously he's still in the Discord call with me, so I have no idea what happened there. But we saw some very interesting racing lines, to say the least. As I see in the background again, sadly, that's the 267 of Marius Fredriksson once again going for a spin. I think that was in the same corner. He's also one that doesn't like the chicane in that first sector. So I understand. Don't worry, Marius. I'm one with you on that. So sadly, he's been put a bit further back, but nevertheless, always big respect to the drivers that are this far back, but they still want to go for a drive. Because obviously, if you keep up the race, not only do you get the points, but especially in this first race, you can get a good idea of where to take the car and the right feeling for the next race. As we go back to the front, Ben Crook now coming up to 5 seconds, 4.8 at the moment, but that gap has become huge between him and Junior. Now, earlier on in the season, back at Spa with an interview with Ben, I remember him saying he actually prefers to have a bit of a lower wing, so not having too much drag coming off of that. So bit surprising to say the least, because we remember in Spa him not having that much top end, but having very good grip from the looks of things, and it just seems to be the same here. I wouldn't be surprised if he's running a relatively low downforce car, but is then finding the pace strangely within the corners. He seems to have adopted the Porsche nature of just running this car where it is absolutely terrifying, where it nearly wants to kill you on every single corner. But if you run it like that, these cars will provide, and by the looks of things, Crook is prime example of that, as the gap has now breached 5 seconds. Junior also seems to be pulling away from Vilcek, as that gap's now become 1.7. And that gap now, sadly, from Barthez has dropped back even more. Not sure what's happened there, but the gap, which was within a second from Barthez, has within 2 laps, I think, come down to 4 seconds nearly. So everyone seems like they're in their own little race at the moment. The gap has just spread apart, with the smallest one at the moment between Junior and Vilcek. So maybe those two are going to be able to provide the entertainment at the moment, as this is far from what I was expecting. Maybe cars holding up, but the start of the race naturally being where these sort of things are going to be able to happen. No one really everyone just having a similar run, so no one being able to jump. However, I am looking at Vestkamp actually catching Barthez as well. Because naturally, Vestkamp, obviously earlier on in the race, had an unfortunate moment where he went wide. So his pace being able to hopefully get him back a couple of places. But we are now below 10 minutes, so we're over halfway through this race now. Vilcek sadly he is pulling back. or not pulling back, he's falling back, sorry, away from Junior. It might just be a case where he's trying to drive to the pace of Junior rather than racing his own race. Something which I partially remember him mentioning when he was racing Crook at Spa. But it might also just be a case that he's not gotten used to the new model of suspension or tyres in the game just yet, because, I've never driven one of these cars after, so driving it now wouldn't help too much. But I do remember, especially with the new model, it being a bit more slidey, and obviously these cars before not having any traction control before being even more slidey. So we've got slidey on slidey, which makes for slidey as we go very wide. Big send, good bravery from Vilcek to, from the looks of things, keep his foot planted on that, trusting that the fact that the car could take the curb. He gets a little bit sideways there, but this is how these cars need to be driven. So that gap has actually come down now. Sector 2 seems to be where Vilcek has good pace on Junior. So gone from 1.9 to 1.7, so 0.2 difference now has changed. But sadly, I think that drift that happened earlier on has sadly played into the favour of Junior, as I think Junior cut the corner a little tight there, maybe getting a track limits. I saw the dust from the inside, which is quite a way in on that chicane, so maybe not the case, but the gap did drop down a little bit, but we are now over 2 seconds gap. As I'm looking back towards the rear of the pack again, I am correct that Vestkamp is indeed catching Partes, so he's wanting to regain some of those positions he lost earlier in the race. But with whereabouts these guys are going to come together to actually have their fight, who knows? I would suspect it's actually going to be very, very close to the end of the race. So Vestkamp may be wanting to get a move on to at least get one position that he oh so feel was stolen from him earlier on, because he very much should be higher up, maybe challenging more likes of Vilcek. Lines through here. He seems to be staying calm and composed, as that gap very much is closing down quickly. Whether it's quick enough, who knows? We're about to get the next lineup of the gap, as it has come down by 0.3 seconds, so a tenth of a second potentially per sector, which I'm gonna have to do quick math at the moment. 3 times, I'm gonna take an assumption of 3 laps, so we've got 9 minus what, so we've got 8 more sectors, and that is 0.3 per 1. He just can do it. He'll be 2/10 up on Vestkamp. Vestkamp will be 2/10 up on Partes by that math, but that's obviously going on the basis that both of these stick to the exact pace, which never seems to be the case, as that's a big chunk taken, but he's taken more of a chunk through the chicane as he really unsettles the car. I think that work he's just done in Sector 2 might have vanished a little bit here as they come across a start finish. Let's see what happened, or the consequence that happened. Yes, he's dropped back a little bit, chewing a little bit too much of the curve. And sadly, I'm looking at the track map again. That is a 267 once again in the gravel. Fredriksson really not finding the comfort zone within these cars on this track. It just might be the new update, who knows. Obviously, with the amount of changes, and especially the fact that it seemed like he's only really driven these cars once before, and that was on the old version of the game. He's gotten used to one, and they've just changed in front of him. So don't blame him for not being too comfortable with all of the changes that have just happened. It seems like at the moment, Partes really pushing the car there as he goes very wide coming into the chicane through the Schumacher S's, or not the Schumacher S's just yet, I'm a bit ahead of myself. This chicane, then we're going through the Schumacher S's as we go. Partes goes wide. That's going to bring Vestkamp into the mix for this position. And it was much sooner than previously anticipated, because naturally anything can happen in these races, and it very much has. Now, Partez really going to not want to be staring in his mirror at the moment. As he goes wide again, he's really going to be trying to push the limits of this car. And hopefully he is comfortable with that setup he's got, as Westkamp looking to the inside. Don't think Partez is really too flustered at the moment. Big braking zone going up here. Westkamp doesn't look for the move, but he is going brave. Seems to be a little more unsettled than Partez. Partez does get a little bit of a better exit, but Westkamp being a bit braver on the brakes here. Is he going to get a good run? Going to use that slipstream of Partez. We've obviously got the big braking zone up ahead. Going to look to the inside. No, he's going to keep it out. Maybe compromising. He has compromised Partez's line. Getting a bit flustered, but Partez has still got the inside line here. Westkamp is going to try and have to stay behind. Good driving from the two of these. Partez going to be hugging that inside line. Doesn't want Westkamp to get anywhere, but he's gone very wide coming out the second chicane, or second part of the chicane, but naturally that wider line has allowed him to hold a bit more speed, so he does stay ahead of Westkamp for now. But he's going to be a bit flustered, and he's going to be struggling now. Holds the inside line once again. Westkamp can't make a move just yet. Potentially looking at the next one, going to be ahead into the final chicane. As once again, Partez goes very wide here. Westkamp putting his nose in. But Partez, none the wiser, does hold to his line comfortably and stays ahead. Schumacher S's. Similar pace on the exit. Maybe a bit of braver entrance on Westkamp's side. But nevertheless, that could be this setup as Partez goes wide. Holds the inside line, and I don't think Westkamp's going to be able to get through. No. Very lucky on Partez's side, as he's managed to screw up in an area where he's being able to defend the inside line. I don't think Westkamp's going to be too happy on that one. As I think we're coming on to the penultimate lap for these two. Crook's already gone ages ago on that one. But a bit of a slide from Partez is going to compromise the straight, the area you really don't want to do. And I think that is going to be it for him. Westkamp makes the move through. But Partez doesn't seem to be done here. Looking to the inside, he's going to try and hold on to the back of Westkamp. Both get a similar exit. As I say that, no, Partez gets a bit too aggressive on the throttle. And I think that might be it. Westkamp is going to hold on to this position very nicely. Partez is going to have dropped back a decent bit. Doesn't mean he can't catch him, but at the moment, with how comfortable these two are in the cars equally, I don't think it's going to happen, sadly. However, I'm saying that's a big send-ons in the inside. I don't think Partez is going to have made it, because that corner cuts her back. Yep, a bit more than possibly previously anticipated. That was a very brave move. Excuse me, as Westkamp, very well analysed. I think he saw that dive coming from a mile back. Stays a bit of a wider line on that curve. And Partez goes wide, which then allows him to get a bit more of a gap once again. As Crook coming around the final corner, I think I'm wondering if he's going to slow down, or is he going to go for another lap? I think he's going to go for another lap, as we only had 19 seconds, I think, there on the clock as he comes over. So we are going to get one more lap. So it's going to make it 11. And that is a big gap. I did actually see Fredriksson actually pulled it. I think he RTG'd at one point, which actually he's come out in front of Crook. Maybe scheming a little to hold him up, who knows, to make it interesting. But with the sort of pace that Crook's got at the moment, and especially that gap being 9 seconds, there's going to have to be some form of a miracle to really push him back that far. That's such a comfortable performance, even after all of the changes that we have seen to this game. Crook still seems dominant as ever, only really being challenged earlier on, as I mentioned at the start, by Andrewson. I've already forgotten names. No, this was the earlier races at Silverstone. This was Andrew Richardson, sorry, excuse me. As that was the main time of really him being threatened. Well, the only time he was really properly defeated, as pretty much the rest of the season, everyone else has attempted. Vilcek's attempted, Junior's attempted. We've had other people, I think at one point, Valenduke even had a go, and I think Lenson, I think maybe had a run at one point. But nevertheless, everyone, none the wiser, has been able to hold this man back as Crook comes around the final corner. Not for the final time, not just yet, as we have obviously got one more race, and I think that is sadly Fredrickson going a bit wide again. I think he might have just spun out so he can get out of the way, but that is it. Crook, once again, Holt just has such a dominant presence within these races. Junior comes across the line to get second, and Vilcek trying to give us a bit of a performance. I don't know if that was an attempt at drifting, not too sure. And Tractor actually himself having a very, very solid performance. And oh my word, Vestkamp, who had the very, very unfortunate start, does have a bit of a recovery drive. He does get a place back to say, to give him a bit of a pep boost for the next race. And Partez looking a bit damaged. He might have had I think he had a spin at some point. But nevertheless, that is that for the first race. And my, oh my, I was not expecting those sort of gaps. The confidence level between each driver seems to be almost emphasized since 1.9's come out, as Ben Crook, despite being faster than everyone else in the races prior, I don't think I've seen a gap that big. As when we've looked back, at least to the races that I explicitly remember. So at the start of the season, when we were at trying to remember tracks, Imola, he had pace, but he always had company. Whether, like I mentioned before, if it was Junior, if it was Vilcek, if it was Lenson, there was always a car potentially within the 2-second area. So he always had a threat that if he screwed up, he would be punished. But this race, I don't think I've seen such a big gap. This was on another level, to say the least. And Junior, especially, someone who in the earlier stages of the season never felt too threatening within the race, having such a better second half to this season, and now proving that he should have always been running at the front, getting that sort of a dominant second position, and Vilcek coming in third. So the top three drivers pretty much solidifying the factor that of why they should be the top three. And actually thinking about the overall standings as well, the 35 points going to Crook for that first race has, I believe, indeed solidified the fact that he is the SSRI Supercup Porsche champion, as that gap would now have come to more than 35 between him and Junior. Well, it is at the moment. Oh, actually, no, it isn't. Oh, am I lying? Oh, I might be lying. My maths might be bad. No, it isn't. But to say the least, if Junior's to steal it in this last race, because that gap's increased by 5 points. So, people, math help. No, it's still within reason, but we need to basically have Ben Crook completely retire this race, and for Junior to at least get second. If there's anyone in chat at the moment who who has the standings up and understands everything, and on top of that, also understands the position, like basically has everything on hand. Please fact check me, because I'm not too sure on that. That's what to say at least. A lot of math going through my head. But to say the least, at least the performance that Ben Crook's been putting through this entire season. I'm actually thinking as well if Dave Jr. has had his race deductions taken off. I think he has missed a couple of races. So he can obviously take one of them. So looking at the overall standings, it does seem pretty prominent. Ben Crook really needing to just absolutely send it into a wall if he doesn't want to win, but I don't think that's really going to happen. But at least coming off the first race, I think Junior and Vilcek really are going to be feeling a little more racy pacey to at least get ahead of Crook coming into the first corner. Actually being a very, very big send zone, to say the least. Actually, it turns out there were more sending zones than previously anticipated, as Partes showed me earlier on with sending it on Vestkamp. But nevertheless, those two holding together very nicely. And I'm looking back, Vestkamp obviously more than likely wanting to do a bit of a better job with that very, very unfortunate spin. Well, no, he didn't spin, sorry. He just went very, very wide into the gravel, which put him back so far to just go on a recovery drive. So hopefully everyone is going to, or I'm hoping soon we're going to be getting into the second race, as my throat is once again vanishing from me. Actually, I'm going to have a quick look at the sector times. So naturally, guess who it is in first place on all of them? Crook, just seconds ahead on each sector. As we come into race number 2, as I see, well, at least pit walls updated. And I'm hoping I think we're going to get, well, when the formation lap appears again, I will go quiet, just so I can give my throat a little bit of a rest. But yes, sectors, at least, sadly it's updated, so I don't have anything left now. But from the looks of things, what I was saying in the race, which was Vilcek having a bit of a better second sector than Dave Jr., seemed to be the case. Jr. feeling a bit more pacey on Sector 1 and Sector 3, which is a very, very strange disparity, depending that Sector 1 is possibly the most mechanical with that very, very tight first sector with the Mercedes Arena, and Sector 3 being the least mechanical with all of the straight lines. As we actually get a very nice overview, as you see the Sector 3 pretty much being started around the Kumo curve, which just then leads you down a long straight with a bit of a kink, a chicane, little hairpin, and then you get another straight line. So what sort of setups these guys are running? Naturally, we can't tell you until the end of the race if we get an interview with one of them, and from what I'm hearing, we've actually got some rain, which is always fun, and especially around here, potentially going to group the pack together a bit more. So these setups are going to change now to the wet setup, which I haven't actually tried the new tire model on the wets around anywhere just yet, but from what I've heard, it's not too far different from what we had before. Naturally, there will be some differences, but overall, in terms of especially pressures, because the pressures were heavily changed on dries, going from aiming around 27.5 to 28 psi to 26 to 27 being the sweet spots. I don't think the wets have changed in that regard. But now, as I'm not sure what's happening at the moment, so we've still got 2.5 minutes. I think all the drivers are swapping between setups at the moment to really get a good setup, because whether everyone's actually done any wet setups, because obviously new system, new setups will be wanted. We can't run on the same toe and camber that we had before, which was basically just completely maxed out, so you just didn't have to think about that too much, which nowadays you very much do. So people potentially having to do one on the fly. So this might bring some very, very interesting factors into the mix on this. See whether everyone is actually now going to be more comfortable, because as I mentioned very briefly in the previous races, in this previous race, these cars do not have traction control. They do help within braking because they still do have ABS, but if you touch that throttle oh so too aggressively, just the slightest, you're going to be doing donuts. As there's a lot of power going to those rear tires, and especially when you have water on the track, there's going to be even less grip. I would probably say the amount of laps are probably going to be dropping from 11 maybe down to 10, as we did cross the line with only 20 seconds. So very, very close to get that final lap in there. But the pace disparity, we might even drop down to 9, to say the least, as people are potentially going to have to be getting used to the new feel of the surface. It's very much going to be a bravery game, as there are some very big... oh my word, as there's some very big send areas. This rain is supposedly going to be getting lighter within the next 10 minutes, though. However, also a bit of useful information, at the end of the race, we are supposed to be dry, but I don't think anyone's really going to mess with that, because looking at the top, the 30-minute mark saying, well, at least not raining. It's still going to be cloudy, so it probably won't dry up. So this is to stay. Now, I don't think anyone's really going to mind with that too much, because obviously only 30 minutes, and it's a very, very prominent sprint race, as these tyres are now going to have to be warmed up quite profoundly on this formation lap. Otherwise, the grip here is very low to begin with, and it will be near enough zero. Once again, I will be quiet so I can give my throat a rest while we have this beautiful formation. on the final corner. Dave Jr. seems a little eager. Very, very far ahead. Maybe not the best move, as those tyres will have cooled down a little bit. Coming up to the line. Green flags are waved. As Dave Jr. actually gets a very good launch. He's already holding very close alongside Crook. Jr. goes wide, trying to hold a compromised line, but that was a very bad idea as both the front runners have gone off, and that lead has already been handed to Vilcek. This is already that poetic ending that I was mentioning, but like I said, even if Crook ends at the back of the pack, I think that's enough points to keep him ahead, and Vilcek isn't even the one that he should be worried about. It was actually Junior who joined him in this case. Now, if anything, Junior's overall standing is at risk because of what's just happened, as Vilcek gets a very, very nice lead, but has already seen Crook trying to make those positions back, getting pushed wide by Partes. And now we're going to actually have the front-running pack from last race at the back, as they're going to have a big recovery drive to make up for that massive, massive mistake. Partes has gone wide. Hopefully he's going to rejoin safely, nearly clipping the back of Ben Crook there. Dave Jr. getting really sideways. Both of these holding on together is actually going to be compromising their overall race. Their pace is not going to be able to hold up, as at the moment Patrick Tractor, I believe that is, just ahead of them, is actually going to potentially cause some issues. As I think now we've actually got a very, very, very mixed up grid at the moment. As actually, I think I said that was Fredrickson. Was that Fredrickson? It was Fredrickson in the background. And one thing I didn't realize is Mr. Partes, the person at the back of last race, has already made the jump on Tractor going into that first corner. Tractor maybe being a bit cautious on the brakes as he's gone wide over the chicane, potentially giving the places he's given them to Ben Crook and Dave Jr., as he might not want to fight these two too much, because that pace difference between these two is going to be something bold to say the least. He's actually going to see if he can keep to the inside of Dave Jr. here, maybe making him known, but he is falling back quite a bit. I don't think he's going to be that brave, as there goes Partes braking himself a bit too much. Comes back on nicely. Vilcek is getting a very, very, very nice gap in the meantime while all of this is happening. The main two rivals in this race having to fight together through the pack, as I don't think Dave Jr. is really wanting to have a look at Crook at the moment while these two are having to make their way through. It seems like just overall though, Crook has actually still got the better pace. At least is a lot more comfortable in the car. Partes holds to the inside. He's gonna fight this. He's going to want to try and compromise Crook's race as much as possible. And there goes Junior going wide once again. Is compromising his race once, having such unfortunate moments. They're really not getting comfortable in the rain. Tractor trying to get back into this fight with him, as he does at least want to have a bit of action. Going very wide. Really going to have to be careful on those brakes. Gets a bit heavy on the throttle. And we've actually got a very slow car here. Partes maybe having a bit of a slide of his own. Big send through the Schumacher S. Bravery is going to be very crucial there. As Patrick Tractor in the background gets a bit wide. There's going to be a big send here from Dave Jr. Looking for the switchback is Partes, but I don't think he's going to be able to make it. Jr. is going to hold him back. Good block on the inside. And that move is near enough done. I don't want to speak too soon. Crook, in the meantime, is going to start making his way up. Next target is Vestkamp, as after that very, very, very bold send, at least into the first corner, just never was going to pay off. I think both Crook and Junior were looking at each other to try and outbrake the other. Naturally, when you're in a situation like that, it's never going to work out, as we look at Vilcek getting sideways through the braking zone. I guess that's one way you can slow down. Just put the car sideways and use the traction of going sideways to slow you down. Would advise against, because it will absolutely shoot the tyres. But Vilcek despite having a very, very good gap and overall the better start, naturally, for not sending it wide, does seem to be struggling. But there is a purple sector machine catching up, as Crook in the background has already caught up to Vestkamp from what I just saw. And I'm not sure if the move's been made. I think it has. It already has. Vestkamp has already had to drop back to Crook. Maybe a fight he didn't want to fight too much, because naturally he will want to use the pace of Crook to at least get back up to Vilcek. Maybe smart move on his half, but who knows? We sadly didn't get to see it, but that move was done awfully quickly. Maybe a fight that Vestkamp didn't just want to fight, because it would have backed him up into the line of Junior, who he potentially stands chances against, because this race, despite being a bit longer, is more than likely going to be a bit easier to defend on if you just hold your line and at least have a bit of confidence. But there's Dave Jr. in the background. His pace is nothing to be sort down on, as he's already making his way up. These two having a very, very good recovery drive, but will it be good enough for Crook to end the season in such dramatic style? As we look back at the Vestkamp overtake, this is Crook and Vestkamp. I think he might just get out the way, or is it a switchback? It's a switchback from Crook. Just takes a different line through the Mercedes arena, and that run coming out of it just allows him to get a better braking area into the RTL, which then eventually allows him to keep ahead, as the gap dropping by a second already between Crook and Vilcek. Vilcek really shouldn't be looking his mirrors. He wants to get hot lap mode. He wants to keep the pace, as there is a red orange. I don't think we've ever actually had this answer. I think it's a red. There's a bit of an orange tinge behind it, but at least the yellow striped Porsche catching up in the background is once again Vilcek getting a bit squirrely. And who's this? Is Patrick Tractor is facing sideways on the circuit. Oh no, what's happened there? Being so consistent through the last race, seems like he didn't get comfortable on the rain. He did have a couple of squirrely moments, to say the least, earlier on, but nothing to say that he would do that. That is severely sad, as he's now been put behind Fredriksson and is more than likely going to have to look at that place as a compromise, which is going to be severely unfortunate. He's looking back. Dave Jr. seems to have fallen behind Vestkamp again, actually. I've just realized Vestkamp has actually made an overtake on Dave Jr. It seems like he managed to get past again, though, already. So we look back at what happens. Tractor, just got on the throttle a bit too aggressively. You have to be very, very cautious with these cars. Once again, said it time and time again, there is no traction control. So if you get on that throttle a bit too aggressive, you're going for a bit of a slide, and that is naturally what just happened. You just get the new sector gaps coming through. That gap between Crook and Vilcek coming down so bit by bit. And actually, that is Dave Jr. now sniffing onto the rear end. Andreas Vestkamp. I'm wondering how hard this fight's going to happen in the background, as we see them coming down the main straight on the little screen in the background. Is there going to be a big send from Dave Jr.? Gets on the brakes relatively same time, so move can't happen, but that is a very, very, very deep Vestkamp. And he might have to give up this position. He is on the inside, but naturally the outside line might be a bit more comparable, as the grip actually then gets given to you. But actually, Dave Jr. outbraking himself a little, does have the inside line, does go a bit straight, does straight line the corner a bit more. And I think Vestkamp once again doesn't want to fight it too much just because of the pace difference. So he's now going to hold up onto him, as he actually hit something on the track. I'm not sure what that was. I think it might have been a sign that was potentially a hit earlier on, because he didn't go off track to hit that. So what he actually clipped to send off flying, not too sure. As we get towards the end of the first 10 minutes, That gap, which was basically the entire grid between Crook and Vilcek, has now come down to 2.5 seconds. Vilcek, being someone who's actually been able to fight with Crook earlier on in the season, now is going to have to know what it feels like to have an absolute machine coming up behind him. As all Crook can really see of him is just a bit of a mist due to the upspray of the rain on these tracks. Vilcek getting a little bit squirrely. Does still have a very good send through the chicane. So does Junior, though, or so does Crook, sorry. Coming up the final straight. Not within slipstream just yet. That's probably going to be for another lap or two. There is still 19 minutes of this race to go. So Vilcek's probably going to have to defend for his life as that red machine catches up so quickly. And actually looking at that, it looked like Crook outbroke himself a little bit there. So compromising his line. The machine is... the machine does bleed. So this is possibly the best position Vilcek has been in. At least since Spa, from what I remember. Naturally, with the conditions we have on this circuit, anything can happen. Looking at the background, the fight between Andreas Veskamp and Dave Jr. still going on. Something's happened there. Junior has fallen back. Not too sure what's happened there. Is this where he's gone? He's gone wide again. I think that's the second time he's gone wide at that corner. He just doesn't seem to find the braking areas as well. And that place given back to Veskamp. So maybe this time round, Veskamp is actually going to want to hold position for a bit longer rather than giving it up so easily. Because from the looks of things, Junior is actually very much beatable. Keep him behind you and keep the pressure on him, and maybe he will bite a little harder. So overall, there's actually a very, very interesting fight happening in the background. One that I never expected to happen, especially with the pace that we had earlier on. Is, oh my word, that was a very, very interesting cut, as we had a close contact there between Dave Jr. and Andreas Veskamp, as they're now coming up to the chicane. Maybe not cutting the first curb as much as they could. But Dave Jr. does seem like he's very, very brave on the brakes, especially in these conditions. And as much as I say that, it obviously has compromised him a little bit. Andreas Veskamp going to the inside. Not sure if that's to let him by or to defend, because he's a bit far back, to say the least, at the moment, to really be able to make a move. He does break the toe, though, to say the least. Does get back online and finds braking zone. As now Vilcek and Crook, we have two big battles going on at the moment, as Crook really is now sniffing up the rear end of Vincent Vilcek, the green pork. Now Dave Jr. falling back, to say the least, on Andreas Veskamp. So Veskamp actually has got incredibly good pace on himself. So he's very much going to want to fight that battle a bit harder. As looking back towards the front runners, Ben Crook just holding on to the rear end of Vilcek. So much confidence within the grip, the mechanical grip of these Porsches. As they come through the Schumacher S, down into a bit of a braking zone. He's going to go for a switchback. I think Crook's looking up the inside. That's not really an area that you want to do it. Get very, very close, but Crook overall is actually going to be able to hold it. Very big braking zone there, as I think Vilcek's trying to keep it a bit safe, as Crook uses all of the track and now has a better run coming down one of the big straights through the little kink. And is he going to look for a move here onto the chicane? Goes to defend, does Vilcek, but Crook doesn't want to make a move here just yet, because that might be in a bit of a dangerous area. As now they're going to look for the exit of this corner. Big moment. Crook compromises the entrance, but then tries to get a big exit. I don't think it's going to be enough because Vilcek equally gets a very, very good exit. Similar pace. Crook's going to want to try and use that toe. Actually goes to the inside to be a bit sendy. He goes for a massive lunge on the inside. Does actually get through and get the car stopped in time. Vilcek can't do anything because there's now a red Porsche in the way. And Crook has managed to get back into the lead. Vilcek trying to get back to the inside, but compromises on the curb and gets on the throttle a little bit later. And actually back in the bottom right corner, Dave Jr. doing the same move, getting that car stopped just in time for the first corner. And now he's ahead of Andreas Vestkamp, sorry. And now both of the front runners are past their fight. So Dave Jr. is now going to be looking forward to trying to catch up to Vincent Vilcek. Vilcek is going to want to try and follow Crook as closely as possible so that that doesn't happen. And once again, Vestkamp is more than likely going to be wanting to look once again at the car in front of him to get that position potentially back, because at the moment Junior does seem to be in a bit of a slidey state, to say the least. And actually looking at the weather, the rain has indeed stopped, so what we actually saw earlier on was pretty much a lie, as the sun is actually peeking its head around. So this track might, oh my word, dry up a little bit towards the end of the race as Vincent Vilcek goes a little bit wide. That's going to give Crook a bit of breathing room, to say the least, as we look a bit back at the move that Dave Jr. managed to do. It was actually through the chicane. Very brave, to say the least, and very, very good racing etiquette shown by the two of these to not hit each other, as that is a big send zone that you have to put it through. So the fact that they gave each other space is massive, massive prop to the two race drivers. And now, looking back at the front runner, Crook pulling away as he always does. 1 second between the two of them already. And now onto a drying track. How well will these drivers adapt to the changing conditions? There's still puddles, there's still water on the track though, and it will be a greasy condition in most places for pretty much the rest of the race, I would say. But being careful where there's puddles, as we see Junior go through one there. Seems like most of them are actually in this first sector. And actually, as I say that, I think about it, we go downhill a decent bit here. So maybe some being more towards the bottom chicane of the track. So now the very in-between conditions of the circuit potentially going to play a factor into how these drivers are going to be. And as I look further down the field, Partez has actually been caught up by Patrick Tractor, who had that initial spin himself. As he's been catching up, maybe getting a bit more used to the conditions, as it's probably getting to more favorable conditions with the drying track. But Partez's pace, which he had early on, very good pace actually, seems to be maybe not withering away. If anything, it seems to be more Trax has found his pace. Gap dropping by 0.3 of a second. I've actually just sadly realised Marius Fredriksson sadly doesn't seem to be really having the best of times, especially in the wet conditions. I don't blame him. These cars are very, very difficult. As he's in the pits, whether that's a full-on leave, well, actually the car would have left, but he seems to be at least spectating from the pit lane. So despite having a bad race, very well done for at least participating and keeping this series interesting, as we were running out of drivers towards the end. Actually, as I've been talking about, that Tractor has made the move on Partez. I don't think Partez is really going to want to give this up too easy, as he's going to try and stay on the rear end of Tractor as much as possible. Both have similar exits out of the chicane. Partez having a tighter line, but does get a little squirrely on the throttle coming out. And I don't think that's going to be enough of a gap or a difference in pace between the two. It actually looks like Trax is gapping even more. And track. Oh my word, as the brakes on Trax's car doesn't seem to really be helping in this situation, as he does hold the inside line. Partez is going to hold it around the outside, stays ahead, but this is far from done. Cuts the inside, big puddle there, which can very easily throw you off because it's on such a high grip sector. Coming down now, Trax is going to have to try and get the move to stick again, as he did earlier on. Both keeping a tight line through the chicane. Similar exits. These two seem very, very much on par at the moment. It's actually something Chris pointed out a second ago. But the track seems to have very much dried quickly. These guys naturally are going to be on wet tyres, so the sort of pace we had in the first race is not going to be the same here, even on a dry track. As Fredriksson has actually come back. Not too sure what happened there. I think he might have been speeding in the pit lane as he has a stop and go 30, which despite being at the back, I don't think is really going to be too much of a fuss. He's just here to drive now. As I've been saying, that tractor goes wide there, that gap increasing once again to Partez. I think Partez is just going to be driving consistent, to say the least. As much as Tractor seems to have the pace on him, consistency is very much key, especially in these machines, as if you do screw up, it seems a lot more lethal than maybe a regular GT3, as there's no systems to save you if you put your throttle in a bit too heavy. Gap now going over a second between the two. That is really compromised Tractor. Trying to find that pace again, both going quite deep into the first corner. They're going to need to move that braking zone back, because despite the track drying up, like we mentioned, they are on wet tires. These tires are going to be absolutely screaming, as that is proven, to say the least. Tractor sending it too heavily into the second part of the Mercedes arena, and the car just straight up losing grip. These tires are not designed for this condition, as they will be on fire, to say the least, as there is just no water to keep them cool. As I look forwards again, Ben Crook managing to get the gap to 2 seconds, but it doesn't seem like he's extending too much more than that. Vilcek has done a very, very good job to hold on to the back of him. Dave Jr. is going to have to make an almighty push to regain second place. I don't think he'll be too unhappy with that, because if he does stay in third and the overall positions stay as they are, this will be, or the standings overall will stay the same. Now to 2.7. I say it's not extending, as he does make a 0.6 increase. And overall, the dominating performance that we've seen from Ben Crook just seems to be holding on. He's had a big hiccup at the start of this race, but even that could not hold him back. As now he's coming 3 seconds of a gap to the rest of the pack, and just an I say a recovery drive. This was just an absolute slaughter drive, to say the least. Makes his way through the entire pack to get to the front. Well, I say the entire pack. Junior decided to join him on this endeavor. So we look back to Vestkamp, despite not being in any running at the moment by the looks of things, having a very, very good race himself, because naturally getting second position at the start of the race, nothing much to scoff at, because obviously he kept cool under the conditions and managed to keep position, not having a spin. He overall in this race potentially been the most consistent, as he's had to fight with Dave Jr. several times due to Jr. getting past and then going a bit wide, and then naturally Vestkamp getting past in those scenarios. Not having the best first race, but this second race very much being more to his liking, as likes of Partez and Tractor are sitting behind him. Tractor not being too happy with the race he's having at the moment, especially after that spin we just saw. Because not only did that spin obviously put him further back behind Partez, but it would have put fire. It would just put molten lava into those tires. And trying to cool down wet tires on a dry track is nothing easy. I can immediately say that, especially with the changes they've made. So potentially wanting to wet them down into a more slick scenario, who knows, but not too sure actually if the model can do that. That would be something I'd be quite interested in. And actually, as I look up, there is a Dave Jr. with a purple, who seems to be finding some very, very nice pace at the moment. So as I say, he needs a miracle to get to the front of the pack. He seems to have found it. However, he has 10 seconds to find within 4 minutes, which will probably give us about, well, 2 more laps after this one. So that miracle is probably going to have to be more in the case of Vilcek making an astronomical, well, just going wide to say the least. I don't want to say an astronomical mess up, because to be honest, with how slow some of these areas are at getting back onto the track, especially with the amount of gravelly areas, just going a bit wide could be all it needs. Once again, Vilcek, those 2.7 seconds don't seem to really be diminishing away. He's holding onto the back of Crook as much as possible. He's almost using the racing line that Crook's using as a crutch to stay ahead of Junior, but it's very much showing that he's got the pace to hold up with these top 3. And that first race, despite being almost just a split case where every car just went to their own zones and drove, he can fight at the front, similar to what I remember seeing at Spa. If he gets held up, he kind of runs in the midfield fights. If he gets at the front, he can hold with these guys. Gap now falling back to 3 seconds, but very much compared to the first race, those gaps not being as big as potentially before. But Crook, once again, doing what Crook does best and just absolutely lapping, which is almost what these cars are designed for. They are just absolute hot lap machines. As Crook seems to be able, the one that obviously can optimize them to the best of their ability, at least amongst these lads, these fine gentlemen. He's able to keep everyone in check. Dave Jr. does hold on to the purple lap, though, wondering if Crook is going to potentially go for a run for it to get the ultimate sweet ending with first position and a purple, or the fastest lap of the race. As we look back, Tractor, oh, actually, something's happened back here. Tractor has managed to get back past Partez. Now, whether that was an overtake, I think it must have been an overtake with how close they are, but Tractor was quite a bit way back, as Tractor has now gone wide. And oh my word, Partez gets way too aggressive on the throttle, as he's set those back tires on fire. There's going to be no grip in them. They're going to have ballooned and set on fire, so you're going to have to be extremely cautious on the throttle now, as he's going sideways through nearly every corner here. And I think, oh, he might have got even more sideways there. Oh, as he's gone wide. Tractor just gets through. That's really unfortunate, because that was a big gap that was between them, but it seems like Tractor's just been able to get into the area where that little mistake did sadly compromise Partez. Luckily, it didn't seem like that little squirrely moment we had just before we went into the replay did do anything vital or crucial to Partez, so he's still on the rear of Mr. Tractor, but nevertheless, he's more than likely not in the position that he wants to be. He wants that position back, but sadly, with the sort of heat that he's just put into those rear tires, it's not really going to be the best scenario. It's Dave Jr. coming a bit sideways himself. Gonna have to be so careful on the throttle, because if you light up those rear tires, that could be it now for the rest of the race, because we are on the final lap overall of the Super Cup series. We're watching the man with the fastest lap, the final podium sitter, heading through the Mercedes sector as Ben Crook comes down just so calm and composed. It's actually unreal. Despite being the front runner, despite being in so many fights, has almost always seemed absolutely unbreakable in scenarios. The only real scenario, obviously, at least in this race that he's had, is at the start of this one, where it was at least an aggressive move, two people trying to outbrake each other, just never going to work out, especially in the wet weather. As the track now seems to have pretty much completely dried up, as you need to be especially careful when you're not on slicks, because these are treaded tires. When racing, they're going to heavily compromise your pace. But Ben Crook, but Patrick Tractor's towards the back. Patrick, actually, speaking of which, Patrick Tractor does actually seem to have managed to pull away from Cartes quite nicely. So he's going to more than likely hold on to that position. Heading through the chicane. Don't want to say anything too soon about where Crook's going to end up. Is he going to get the fastest lap here? Because this would have been the best scenario, best situation for him to do. As Ben Crook, the winner in Nurburgring and your overall Super Cup champion, doesn't get the fastest lap, but nevertheless is your overall winner. Vincent Vilcek comes home in second in this race, very consistent. And Dave Jr., despite the start, does a very, very similar case with the recovery drive, gets to third, doesn't get Vilcek, but he does get Vilcek in the overall standings, as Vestkamp loves to get sideways into that chicane, but is very much going to hold on to fourth, as he's going to give us a performance around the final corner. Don't send it too much, mate. You've still got people behind you, but he is going to hold on to fourth and get the final position. And I'm thinking, will that actually help him in the overall standings? I think actually, yes. He might actually have overtaken Dan Lenson, because Lenson's not appeared tonight. But those two positions, so a fourth place and a fifth place, will actually have given him enough points to get over into fourth overall. So 1, 2, 3, and fourth in the overall standings being here tonight in the race. Your podium sitter in more than half of the races we had all season. Mr. Ben Crook, just over 50%, not by much. Naturally, those two races at the end helping out quite a bit. But more than 50% of race win in this series. A very, very dominating performance. My word, an absolute machine. Dave Jr., naturally mentioning not having the best start to the season, but having an almighty recovery to come back and get second position over Vincent Vilcek in third. Absolutely massive congratulations to the lads. As I see in the interview waiting room, I think we can pull him up pretty much immediately. We have our third place sitter, Mr. Vincent Vilcek. How are we doing, good sir?
Well, hello there. Yeah, it's been an okay day, I think. It's the Koningsverjaardag in the Netherlands, so it's a national holiday. I resisted the temptation of drinking. It was very close, though. Very close, not gonna lie. Weather was beautiful out.
Why not?
Well, why not for this beautiful season finisher? It's a shame only 7 people arrived, or 8 was it?
7.
7? I thought it was 8 in the beginning at the practice server. Well, anyway. Yeah, it's a shame only 7 people arrived, because I love the cup cars. They're incredible fun, as you could clearly tell in the rain. They're even better in the rain. I mean, any car is better in the rain, but they're very easy to control, actually, despite what people think or what it looks like. I think the cup car is one of the easier cars to control in the rain, and yeah, it was a good day. It was a lot of fun, and P3 and 2 is good enough to finish the season for me.
I mean, overall, speaking of which, with the rain, how did you feel with that first corner scenario with Dave Jr. and Ben Crook just absolutely sending each other so deep into the first corner and just immediate promotion into first position? Because it seemed like you very much had the car under control, so you knew what you were doing. These two fighting in front, but how did it feel just being promoted so quickly?
Honestly, I didn't quite realize until the exit of turn 1, because during the first race there was the disconnection. I think everybody had some server issues. So the picture of who was it in front of me at the time? Junior was in front of me.
Junior, yes.
Junior was right in front of me into, I think, Schumacher SS or whatever, and he just kept on driving straight into the wall. So my first thought was, okay, wheel failure or whatever. I just kept on driving. I was like, too bad for him. Well, good for me, I guess, but what a shame. And then a lap later, everybody came back. I was like, oh crap. that was me. So when it happened in the rain race in turn 1, I kind of thought the same thing for a second. Because I just saw Crook going straight. Hey, Crook.
Speaking of which,
I just saw him absolutely going straight into turn 1. So I thought, oh, another disconnection and another server issue. So I just kept on driving, and then after turn 1, it was clear. Oh no, it was actually just those two. Quite surprised, because I thought I took it very careful into the corner and made it not just, but it was less buffer than I thought there would be. So yeah, those guys are breaking a normal breaking point, I would guess. I don't know. I didn't drive a single lap in the rain, so I didn't know what to expect. So I just kept it very careful. Well, turns out that was a lucky one from my side.
I mean, if we go to the other side of the story, is Ben Crook, our overall, well, not only our winner in these two races, but the overall championship winner. Congratulations to begin with. But if we go back to the scenario that we've just been talking about, that the T1 incident in that second race, it looked like both you and Dave Jr. were kind of having the fight between the two of you, who had the biggest dick, who could go or who could brake later into that corner. And naturally in the rain, I don't know how much you've not only done driving in the rain, but especially with these new physics. How did it overall just turn out when it came to both of you not only staring at each other going into the braking zone, but then also going deeper into the braking zone?
Well, it was absolutely terrifying. So I was trying to gauge how much grip there was on the formation lap, and it felt okay. Like, it felt like there was a good amount of grip. Just maybe brake a little bit earlier than usual was my plan. So that was always my plan, is to brake just before the 100 board. And I think, yeah, having Dave by my side, that caused me to brake a little bit later. But even if I braked where I planned, I would have gone absolutely flying. There was just much less grip than I thought.
And especially then having that recovery drive. I mean, we've kind of said it all season. You seem to be this absolutely unstoppable machine. How did it feel having to fight through the field? Because luckily happening so earlier on, everyone was still relatively grouped together. Did you get overall then a feel for the wet weather to then help you find the pace, which then eventually help you catch up with Vilcek and get you that win?
Eventually, yes. So during the first lap or two, I was still trying to figure out how much grip there was whilst trying to overtake people. So there was quite a few instances where I tried to line up a good exit. Everything went perfectly to plan. I thought, I'm going to have a better exit here. Just touched the throttle and started to go sideways. So there was a sweet spot about 4 or 5 laps in where the car felt great. Then it started to dry up. The rear tyres were just too hot. And it actually felt, even though the lap times were faster, it felt like I had less grip once it dried up a little bit. And the
Sounds like a Porsche. Sounds like a Porsche.
Yeah, that was so much fun. I presume the time multiplier was quite high because it dried out in what felt like 2 laps. That was crazy.
I'm not. Yeah, I mean, initially we were supposedly going to have a wet race all through, but no, it dried up very quickly. And actually, thinking on that side of things, going back to you, Vilcek, when it came to obviously being at the front of the the grid, normally what the best mindset or the best idea to do is kind of get into that hot lapping zone, to just zone everything out and just start getting pace within the laps. Now, naturally, the sort of pace you have compared to the likes of Ben here isn't going to be the same, but how did it feel in terms of getting to grips with the car? Because like we've mentioned, the 1.9 updates with the new tire models, I don't know how it feels compared to before, but how did you adapt with getting used to the car, especially in these conditions? Like you said, you hadn't actually driven in the wet before yourself.
For the Cup car today, I didn't get much laps in. I think I had 1 hour of dry running somewhere in the morning and no wet, and that was about it. I didn't feel much different, to be honest. I always think the Cup car is much more reliant on your setup. When you change the setup, I mean, there's barely any things you can change on the setup, as dampers are all stick to the same. The springs are all already set, but the little you can play around with tire pressures, now in particular, obviously tire pressures with on the dry tires, and especially the anti-roll bars, change the dynamic of the car a lot. I saw Andy posting the video with the bouncy car, so I straight away went for a very soft anti-roll bars, hoping that will somehow avoid it. Seemed to work for me somewhat. I mean, it did bounce, but not buggy like was to be seen on that video. But I never really fully got into that hot lap mode, as you say, especially in the rain. Well, in the first race, it was clear to me my pace is going to be always P3. Ben is way off the charts. If I'm lucky, Junior has a bad day and I can catch up with him. But for me, it was always clear P3 is where I'll start, P3 is where I'll settle. I'm just going to stick around for that. And the wet, I always feel like, the wet is always a bit more of a gamble. You could be a bit more lucky with the pressures you were guessing, because obviously the pressures were completely guessed, as there were no reference marks whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I totally guessed wrong, to be honest. I had 30.8 to begin with when it was raining a lot. So the moment it started drying up, and I knew it was gonna dry up, I knew that the tires were gonna burn out. So pretty much the moment I realized Ben Crook is the next guy behind me in P2, even if it was 5 seconds behind me, I knew, that's not gonna end well. Let's not bother with him really. My first thought was then, maybe it dries up quick enough to go back to the dries, because I prepared my dry tire pressures in a pit stop, so I was ready to jump in as soon as it would dry up. It didn't quite dry up as fast as I was hoping for. There was a moment I was considering it, but then again, there were just a couple of laps left. The math didn't check out, unfortunately. If it was an hour race, could have been more interesting, but this way, because the pressures were high to begin with, I knew that there's no point of even fighting Ben. At one point I was like, okay, keep the tires keep it as low as possible. Maybe he has a puncture or something. I was just guessing at that point how high everybody else's pressures were, and mine were very close to a puncture in the end. I mean, I did 3 donuts in the end in turn 1 after the finish line, and immediate puncture. So that was at both sides as well, both sides, left and right rear. Wow. So that's unusual on a donut. But now it was clear to me that nobody was going to be able to catch Ben, or the other way around. Ben was easily going to catch me. So the moment I saw them fly off into the distance, I was hoping P2, and that's what I got. So couldn't ask for more, really. The guy is insane. Maybe next season. I don't know. It seems like the new dry tire physics suit me a bit better compared to my immediate surroundings, to my immediate teammates that I can compare with. Maybe that was just the 2 tracks that we had so far. We'll see. I'm excited for the new update, and I'll definitely spend some more time now in the sim.
Perfect. And speaking of actually the setups and overall the tires with you, Ben, naturally the wet tires being a bit changed, I don't think the pressures have changed too much compared to last update. Might be very wrong. How did you find setting up the car with the new tire models, both in the dry and the wet? And then off of that, with the wet becoming dry, how did you then cope with essentially not only ballooning tires, but wet in the dry?
So for the dry, I tend to start off with 0 toe front and rear, and pretty much max camber. I think it's 5 clicks less than max for the Cup, just because it can go up to, I think it's 5 or 4.5. And what I try to do now, especially in the Cup car, is keep a more positive toe at the rear, because it's the throttle oversteer that makes the Cup car so difficult. Okay. So, yeah, I feel that the higher pressures as well in the dry suit quite a lot of the corners on this track, especially more on the Cup car. So in the dry, yeah, it felt quite good. I stuck with the aggressive preset, made a few changes, which my go-to for the Cup car is always slam the front as low as possible and raise the rear to about 115 for a lot of rotation. And that worked fine. For the wet, I didn't even know there was a chance of wet weather tonight. So yeah, as soon as I saw the rain in the practice server, I was just basically making random changes. So I was going very positive toe, reducing the camber, stiffening the rear suspension. I was just trying to make the car as stable as possible, which I think actually helped, especially towards the end of the race where the rears were completely dead. But overall for 1.9, I think it suits my driving style a bit more than 1.8 did, because you basically have to be more considerate with your inputs. You've got to load up the tyre a bit slower than, like, in 1.8 you could just throw it in and the car would grip. I've noticed tyre wear is a big factor in 1.9 as well. I had a wet GT3 race the other night. It's the first time in the probably year and a half, 2 years I've been playing ACC that I've actually had tyre wear on wet tyres. Normally in 1.8 they had infinite grip, but not anymore. So yeah, I was scared of them ballooning too much and getting a puncture at the end. I was just scared. I was terrified. I was also scared of Vincent pitting because I was considering the same, but I was trying to do the math as I'm going round. So there was, I think, roughly 10 minutes left when it was dry enough for slick.
I think it was drying. There were still puddles.
Yeah, but I've fallen for that trap before, and you think it might be quicker to go for slicks, but then you realise your slicks never get up to temperature and they end up with very low pressures, and it's not that much faster. So yeah, it was just trying to be fast without
a cautious race. Yeah. Right.
No, that was good fun.
So yeah, to finish off, if we start with you, Vilcek, any final words, especially with the fact that that's it for the season, 3rd overall for yourself. So any final words to anyone listening?
If you are considering joining the Cup Car Series, honestly, do. I know it looks a bit sad with only 7 participants, and it sounds weird coming from me, obviously enjoying this series, asking for more people to join. But just give it a try. This car is so much fun. Yes, it does take 5, 10, maybe 20 laps to get used to it and not spin around every single turn. But the moment you have the car under control, you know where the limit is, just driving without traction control is so much fun, because you're so much more considerate about your tires than you are in a GT3 car. In a GT3, I'm always considering millimeters or centimeters, I should say, left and right of the curbs. With the Cup car, it's really the input, as Ben said. It's about keeping the tires nice, keeping them in a good window to not have that tiny bit of drift angle to heat them up, to keep them cool. That just, this fine tuning, this feeling in the throttle, there's nothing like it. Try the Cup car, be frustrated for a couple of laps, but then try it again, and you will enjoy it. And for the next season, guys, just come on. This is some good stuff. And even in the rain, it's even easier to drive in the rain than in a GT3 car. Just try it out. It's great.
Beautiful. So anyone listening, you better now. You better. Anyway, any words from Ben Crook, our overall champion winner?
I don't think I can say anything quite as well as Vincent just did, but I agree with everything you just said. And it makes you faster in a GT3, because if you can drive a Cup car fast and keep it on the track, hopping into a GT3 car after that, it seems like a toy. It's just easy after the Cup car.
And final timing, hello, Dave Jr., our second place in the overall standings, has decided to join us at the very end. Do you want to say something quickly?
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Sorry I didn't get your message too late. But yeah, it was a great season. The second race was pretty wild with the rain. Yeah, couldn't get to the pressures as quickly, but wasn't too bad. The first T1 was
big dive.
Right. It was all or nothing. All or nothing. But yeah, great season. Well done to everyone. Definitely.
So yeah, and congratulations to yourself, and congratulations to all three of you, because now we've actually made up the full podium here, I guess. So if you've got champagne, throw it around in Discord. I don't know how you're going to be able to do that. But yes, congratulations to Ben for first, Dave for second, and Vincent for third. So congratulations, gentlemen. And that will be it for us for the Super Cup until the latter half of this year, where we'll be, well, it's to be decided, it's to be announced what will be taking place of this, whether we're going to have another Super Cup like this or something a little bit different. That is in the discussion. So keep an eye on the SSRI Discord. And at least from here, that will be all from the Super Cup here. And once again, I want to just say a big thank you for our man in the booth, Chris Hill, who not only is doing all of the beautiful camera work, but is also giving us some lovely information in my ear. So things are helpful. So he's always extraordinarily helpful on these things. So give him all the love in the Discord whilst you're there. But from me and from the Super Cup series, that would be us signing off. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next season.